The Punisher. Obligatory memes aside, Big Francis Castle has been a pretty popular character for Marvel since his initial debut back in 1974, when he tried to kill Spider-Man. Since then, the Punisher has become one of Marvel's biggest anti-heroes, a traumatized war veteran that lost his entire family during an IRL Battle Royale game, who is now hell-bent on gunning down any criminal he sets his sights on, racking up a body count only matched by your mum. I mean, my man's even killed the entire Marvel Universe at one point in time, as well as dying and then being resurrected by Morbius, who turns him into a Frankenstein-like monster called Frankencastle. Comics are fucking weird, man. Evidently, Frank over the years has built up a rather violent reputation for himself, using his well-known superpowers like murder, kidnapping, torture, extortion, and of course, threats of violence. The Punisher is a one-man army, and since his inception, there's been multiple attempts to portray him in different media, with probably the most well-known adaptation being the Punisher TV show, starring Shane from The Walking Dead and the Shouty Man from The Bear. However, for as good as I think the Punisher series is, I think there's something which better illustrates how bloody and sadistic the Punisher truly can be. That being the 2005 video game, which was so violent that it was nearly banned in both the UK and Australia, as well as Germany placing it on the Federal Department for Media Harmful to Young Persons list.
Won't somebody please think of the children?
Developed by Volition prior to them making the first Saints Row game, and published by THQ prior to them going bankrupt, the Punisher game was a very loose tie-in to the 2004 movie. You know, the one where Kevin Nash played a large Russian man.
OMG, Kevin Nash, WTF, thought he was dead, LOL.
It also starred Thomas Jane as the Punisher, who reprises his role here with honestly a pretty great performance, delivering Frank's nihilistic lines with a voice that sounds like he drinks nails for breakfast. However, I think the game's main influence comes from the comics written by Garth Ennis, drawing primarily from the storyline Welcome Back Frank, a 12-issue miniseries that came out way back in April 2000, and it pretty much single-handedly revived the Punisher's popularity. And I mean, it's easy to see why. Just look at this page where Frank punches a polar bear. Welcome Back Frank basically reinvented the character, returning him to the city streets with a heavy focus on crime-related stories, throwing in some dark humour for good measure. Hence, you know, the whole punching a polar bear thing. Anyway, its influence can be easily seen all over any other Punisher-related media, including this game with the Nucci crime family being one of the main antagonists, which isn't too surprising considering Garth Ennis was a writer on this thing too, and you can tell.
It's a shame I could kill you only once, Bobby.
Something else I feel like I should mention is that Welcome Back Frank and the subsequent Marvel Knights run isn't the only thing Garth Ennis is known for. Some of his other work includes the likes of Preacher and The Boys, both of which being known for their mature content. And after the success of Ennis' initial run on The Punisher, he would eventually write Punisher Max, which is oh god. See, Garth Ennis is notorious for his hatred towards superheroes. Like, he thinks they're dumb and would much rather write comics about war and shit. So, under the Max imprint, which was basically Marvel's mature adults-only rating, Ennis had the freedom to do whatever he wanted with the Punisher and not feel obligated to include any other superheroes, allowing him to write much more, realistic stories. This led to Punisher Max being filled with some of the most brutal and horrific stuff you could possibly think of, re-establishing Frank Castle as a Vietnam War vet who desperately needs to go to therapy. Like, this comic includes so much shit that I can't even talk about on YouTube. It is a darkly gruesome book which absolutely does not hold back in depicting the worst kinds of criminals imaginable. But with that being said, how does this book have any relation to the Punisher game? Well, despite the comic only coming out a year before the game, I feel like Volition definitely read a few issues during development and decided it would be a good idea to make the game just as fucking violent.
This is what we call an electronic danger noodle.
Now, this wasn't the first time we've seen the Punisher in video game form. He did have a couple other game adaptations back in the 90s, with the most notable one being the 1993 arcade game, which was basically a side-scrolling beat-em-up. But now you have a gun. However, after that, there wasn't another Punisher game for over 10 years, seemingly locked away to stop any more pixelated bloodshed. Well, that was until Volition found the keys. But first, ad time. Do you ever wake up in the morning, drag yourself through to the bathroom, look at yourself in the mirror, and think, what happened? You used to look so youthful, full of life, and most importantly, your face was smooth. However now, normal razors just don't cut it. But don't worry, my friend, because Harry's is here to help. Here you go, mate, just follow these steps. Harry's offers high quality razors at an affordable price, produced from their very own factory in Germany, where they've been making blades for 100 years. See, shaving can be a time consuming process, and if you're using the wrong kind of razor, it can leave your face feeling pretty rough. But Harry's razors make shaving super easy, incredibly fast, and in combination with their shave gel, your face is left feeling buttery smooth and looking absolutely dashing.
I'm badass.
I mean, just take me for example. Here I am before using Harry's, and now here I am after. So if you want to get your hands on one of these bad boys, just use the link in the description or go to harrys.com/alexwebb to get a trial set for only $5. Wow, just look at you now, my friend, ready for a great date night. Ironically enough, the game begins with Frank incarcerated at Rikers Island, under interrogation for, well, fucking everything really. From here, Frank talks about the past few weeks he's had, doing the usual Punisher things like shooting up a bar one week,
What'll I be, buddy?
to then nuking a whole island ran by evil Russians the next. This is how the majority of the game's story is told to you, as Frank recaps the various places he's went and why he was there, which was mostly to shoot people. We then flash back to 3 weeks earlier with Frank walking through the, beautiful streets of New York before coming across a local crack house where he sees someone casually getting thrown out the window.
Larry, look! It's the fucking Punisher!
No shit. Hey, asshole, come get some.
Time to call it a night.
Taking heavy inspiration from Max Payne and other prominent third-person shooters at the time, The Punisher is a game which revels in its over-the-top violence, with Frank basically being a walking tank who has an excessive amount of weapons. Like, who gave this man a fucking flamethrower? Seriously though, for this game being a Marvel product, it has way more in common with Manhunt than any other superhero game, putting an emphasis on seeing Frank kill these criminals in some incredibly creative ways.
I ain't gonna lie, I'm getting cooked.
Or you could just opt for the more simple approach and stab them to death, the good old British way. To add to all this, you can also use enemies as human shields to protect yourself against oncoming gunfire. You know, in case you forgot your bulletproof vest at home. This is actually a super useful mechanic because during the later levels you're going up against practically the entire Yakuza and what feels like the whole country of Russia. So having an extra bit of protection does come in pretty handy. Speaking of which, the levels in this game are incredibly varied, with Frank enjoying trips to places like Central Zoo, Stark Towers, a tropical island, and of course he attends a funeral.
It's the Punisher.
Big Undertaker fan, I see. Other than being a different place to shoot people in, each level also has unique environmental kills you can pull off, which are, about what you'd expect, as well as having a feature that this game became known for: special interrogations. See, throughout the game, you have the ability to interrogate any criminal you see, intimidating them so much with your pure masculine energy that eventually they'll divulge some useful information. Or just say something dumb.
Are all Americans this violent?
Specifically, there are certain enemies that have valuable intel which can actually help you throughout the level. Obviously, this means you're gonna have to make these criminals talk, you know, spill the beans. And this is where the special interrogations come in. All you need to do is escort one of these lovely gentlemen to a marked location and then get rid of your moral compass, as Frank proceeds to brutalize these guys in a variety of messed up ways. This is where the Manhunt influence becomes very apparent, because these interrogations are basically executions, with Frank using anything he can get his hands on to inflict bodily harm. Seriously, there's an absurd amount of these interrogations, ranging from death via wood chipper to feeding someone to an actual shark or turning them into a fucking hot dog. Clearly, Volition had a lot of ideas for these interrogations, and honestly, it's super impressive. But I do hope they get the help they need soon. Now, to be fair, the game does penalise you for murdering these guys after they've given you the information you need. But come on, man, how do you expect me to pass this up?
It doesn't fry!
However, something you may have noticed is that these executions have a weird high contrast filter slapped on them, effectively obscuring the violence, and there's a reason for that. See, the initial cut of this game never included the filters, and the executions looked like this.
Dark. Pog.
But the second this version was put in front of the ESRB, it was deemed way too violent and received an adults only rating. This would have been disastrous for the game, because both Microsoft and Sony don't allow adults only titles on their consoles, meaning other than PC nerds, no one would be able to play the game. So both THQ and Volition sat down with the ESRB and came to a compromise, that being to heavily censor these explicit scenes so that the game could receive a mature rating instead, thus meaning The Punisher could be sold on the PS2 and Xbox. It didn't stop there though, because in the UK, the BBFC wanted further changes, asking for the camera to effectively not show you the killings and instead zoom in on stuff like Frank's beautiful face. Australia also demanded similar cuts, with the ACB flat out removing 2 scenes from the game entirely. Perhaps the strangest reaction though came from Germany, who, as I said at the start, placed the game on the Federal Department for Media Harmful to Young Persons list, a list with the self-proclaimed mission to protect children and adolescents from media which could be harmful to minors. I don't know, man, I think this looks fine. Anyway, once you've wiped all the blood off your screen, there is a proper story to this game, and surprisingly, it's not actually half bad. Starting off with Frank going after low-level drug dealers and helping out this lovely woman.
Hey, you're the Punisher. Thanks, man.
For what?
For saving my life?
Right.
The game then quickly spirals into the Punisher taking on the Nucci crime family, the Russians, Kingpin, and the Yakuza before eventually fighting Jigsaw. No, not that one. The story is basically a domino effect, with Frank killing one person, which leads him to kill another more important person. So, as a result, the story increasingly gets bigger and bigger in scale. Now admittedly, I do think the Punisher is at its best when Frank is targeting mob bosses and corrupt politicians, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't find this game incredibly entertaining, purely based on how darkly comedic it can be.
Damn it, Castle. This was my favorite bar.
Like as I mentioned, The Punisher is written in part by Garth Ennis, alongside Jimmy Palmiotti, and together they brought an insanely dark wit to the game, which the comics have become known for. The writing overall is genuinely great and adds some much needed levity considering the rest of the game is like this. Seriously though, the story could have easily been the Punisher shows up, shoots people, leaves, mission done. And yeah, to be fair, a lot of the early game is like that, but it's held together by the competent writing, a standout performance by Thomas Jane, and a score which sounds like it was composed by God himself. Not to mention, there's numerous cameos from multiple different characters, so if you're a big Marvel fan, you'll be happy to see the likes of Iron Man and Black Widow showing up.
Do memes move?
This is awesome.
Personally, my favourite inclusion is Matt Murdock being your lawyer, although he definitely wasn't my first choice. As for the ending, once Frank has recapped his 3-week-long bloodbath, it's revealed that his master plan all along was to purposely get arrested and taken to Rikers Island so he can finally take out another man who's locked up there. Jigsaw.
I would let Ben Barnes spit in my mouth.
For anyone unfamiliar with this character, in the comics the Punisher launched him through a window, ruining his beautiful looks in the process, hence his name being Jigsaw.
You fucked up my face.
Anyway, at this point in the game, Jigsaw has somehow taken over the Yakuza and ordered them to steal Stark tech to help him break out of prison. However, using his massive brain power, Frank managed to figure out Jigsaw's plan, and with the help of his secret informant, revealed to be Detective Soap, Frank is in the exact right place to stop this escape.
You done the right thing, Soap. All along.
All he needs to do now is make it through the dozens of rioting prisoners, which, as you'd expect, doesn't prove too difficult for him.
What the hell are you?
Eventually, you make your way to Jigsaw, who's equipped himself with Iron Man armor, leading us into the final boss fight. Now, mostly boss fights in this game have been you firing an ungodly amount of bullets into someone, with the only exception being a fight that happens in Frank's apartment when you get an uninvited guest. Besides that though, they aren't exactly the game's strong point, and this fight isn't anything different with you trying your best to avoid the various missiles being fired your way. Anyway, after you spend half an hour chipping away at Jigsaw's health bar, you eventually defeat him and the game comes to a close with Frank throwing Jigsaw to his death.
Released into your custody.
Now once I finished the game, I came away thinking that honestly, it was pretty great, despite the seizure-inducing filters. I mean, I wouldn't go as far to say it's a masterpiece, but it was an incredibly fun way to spend like 10 hours of my time, and I definitely wasn't the only one with that opinion.
Someone cooked here.
IGN gave it an 8 out of 10, stating, "How scary is human nature that the more extreme the violence gets, the funner it seems to be." Wow, so true. Some other notable reviews I've seen were from a company called Maximum Online, who gave the game a 10 out of 10, claiming The Punisher was the most immersive strategy game ever created. I don't think they were playing the same game though. Sure, not everyone enjoyed it as much, but overall it seemed like a lot of people really appreciated this game, receiving other reviews like 8 out of 10, this isn't vengeance, it's punishment, 9 out of 10, wow, and then a lot of dots. 8 out of 10, there are a few problems, but overall, good game. And 9 out of 10, why was a sequel to this game never made? Which is a really good question considering they actually started developing one.
I have no knowledge of any of this.
Despite all the controversy around this game, it evidently did well enough to warrant a sequel. So after its release, Volition got a small team to start development on their next Punisher game. And this time, it would be open world. Not much is known about this sequel other than the fact it would have been an open world Punisher game, which is a mouth-watering concept, and that it would have been called Punisher 2 Sandbox Punishment, which as far as names go, is fucking awful. However, for unknown reasons, the game was inevitably cancelled, and Volition shifted all their focus into developing their other project, Bling Bling, which after a much needed name change, would become known as Saints Row. It's actually super apparent, looking back at the Punisher, how much Volition actually took from it and inserted into Saints Row. From the aiming to using people as human shields, it almost feels like this game was a prototype for what would eventually become Volition's biggest franchise. You know, before they ruined it. We would, however, get another Punisher game a few years later. The Punisher No Mercy. Now, I had absolutely no clue this game existed before making this video, but based on how empty its Wikipedia page is, I don't think anyone else knows about it either. A first-person arena shooter developed by Zen Studios, a company best known for making pinball games, No Mercy was completely slaughtered by critics for being, well, awful. The only favourable review I could find came from PlayStation Magazine, giving it a 7 out of 10 and saying, it's definitely playable. Although considering No Mercy was a PSN exclusive, I think they may have some slight bias. The thing is though, this terrible game was and still is the last Punisher game ever made, meaning since 2009, Frank has yet again found himself back in that cell, locked away for the foreseeable future. It's honestly weird to look back at this game's history and see all the controversy around it, because in comparison to today's standards, this is like a kid's game, fun for the whole family. It's a shame too, because I think this game had some fantastic gameplay that is overshadowed by the amount of censorship it went through. I mean, sure, it isn't perfect, like Frank is clunky to control, the game's too dark at points, and the voice acting is hit or miss.
Quite a time you've been having lately, eh, Castle?
Fucking voice.
But as a whole, this game certainly deserves its flowers, and if anything, it shows the true potential for what a Punisher game could look like today. Unfortunately though, no developers have attempted to make one, opting to stick with less controversial characters like Spider-Man and everyone's favourite orphan, leaving the rights, along with Frank, to rot inside their cell. But with that being said, all it takes is for someone to find that key and let the Punisher loose one more time.
My whole family died in a mob hit. I should have died too. I took enough bullets, but I lived. I finally figured out why.